Well, hello there. It's Chaplain David, and today's recording is for Sunday, October 18th. A couple weeks ago, I uploaded a video called Praising from the Pit, When It's Your Fault. And today I'm going to continue that, but I'm talking about praising from the pit when it's not your fault. And so today we're going to be talking about Noah. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with a lot of the parts of Noah's story. But what's interesting in Genesis 6, verse 9, it starts out by saying, "This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God." That's how we're introduced to this guy. We don't know really anything about him up to that point. And interestingly enough, this one of the most life-changing stories is about to happen, and he's going to be a big part of that story, and he has no idea what's going on. We know right off the bat that Noah did nothing wrong. He was blameless. And sometimes that's just the way life goes. Obviously, with COVID, it's an easy example. We didn't do anything wrong to deserve this. All of a sudden, it's just upon us, and we all have to try to navigate through it. Obviously, in your own life, there might be times where you were wronged, you were disappointed, somebody attacked you, somebody thought little of you, I don't know, whatever it might be. And often, we didn't do anything to even deserve that. But I do believe that we should all be praising God and trusting Him through it all. And through this message, I think you're going to get some tips on how to keep doing that. So, continuing the story in Genesis chapter 6, verses 12 to 14, God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, "I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out." Here we see God giving very specific directions to Noah, very specific instructions. And I can't imagine what Noah must have been thinking. We don't get to see any kind of dialogue here. We don't see Noah questioning or wondering. We just get these specific directions about this very awful situation that Noah has found himself in. And it's interesting as you read through, God gives even more specific directions. And you know that Noah would not have known what rain was at the time. So the idea of building a boat, this massive boat, when you don't even know why, must have been a head scratcher. If you continue on in verse 22, it says that Noah did everything just as God commanded him. That is beautiful. So here we get a story about a person who was blameless. He was a righteous man. God comes to him and says, "Here's what's going on. The world's falling apart. I'm going to have to judge them, and I need you to build a boat to keep you and your family safe." And we don't get to read any kind of dialogue. We just read very specific directions from God and the fact that Noah obeyed God and did everything he was told to do. If you continue on, it actually says in chapter 7, verse 5, again, that Noah did all the Lord commanded. Now, some theologians have done calculations to try to figure out exactly how long it took Noah to build the ark based on the ages of his sons and some other things that are mentioned in other scriptures. So we know it would have taken him around 60 to 70 years to build the ark. Imagine the whole time you're building something that you don't even fully understand to protect you from something that you completely don't understand and also had nothing to do with. And all this time we see Noah, though he's stuck in this very difficult and weird situation, he never complains, he never grumbles, he simply builds the ark. Now we also know that the rains came for 40 days and 40 nights, but it also says that the water stayed on the land for 150 days before it began to recede. And of course we know it would have taken quite a long time for all that water to recede. So Noah and his family were most likely on the boat for at least a full year. And again, we never hear about him complaining. Obviously, there might have been some conversations that were had that aren't recorded. And I know many people don't consider this a real story. They think of it more as an analogy or a metaphor. But it's interesting that this story was written about by many other cultures. And I'm going to read this from David Guzik, who's one of my favorite theologians to read. Of the more than 200 cultures that have their own account of the flood, the following aspects of the story are common. 88% describe a favored family, 70% attribute survival to a boat, 95% say the sole cause of the catastrophe is a flood, 66% say that the disaster is due to man's wickedness, 67% record that animals are also saved, 57% describe that the survivors end up on a mountain. And many of the accounts also specifically mention birds being sent out, a rainbow, and 8 persons being saved. So that's pretty cool that a lot of other cultures wrote about the same idea. I'm just going to continue though. I love the scripture, Psalm 40 verse 2. He brought me out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay, and he set my feet upon a rock, making my footsteps firm. I hope that whatever situation you're in, whether you created it or fell into it or inherited it, that you can understand that God is bigger than your situation. And hopefully you can learn a few things from some of the things we just read about. We can trust God's sovereignty. We can trust God's plan. We need to obey him immediately, and we can't complain. So, if you're in a pit, even if it's not your fault, what are you doing in that pit? Are you trusting that God is sovereign in all things, that he is bigger than whatever your situation is? Are you trusting that God has a plan for you to get you through this, to get you out of this, to move you onward and upward? More importantly, as we see often here in Noah's story, are you obeying him immediately? When God tells us something, especially when it doesn't make sense, we don't want to waste time wondering and asking and complaining and going back and forth. We need to obey immediately. Do exactly what he tells us to do, the way he says to do it, and just trust that he knows what he's doing. That's what Noah did, and it kept him and his family, and really all of us, alive because of his obedience. And finally, we can't complain. It's important that we just trust that God knows what he's doing, and even though I am frustrated or aggravated or annoyed or I'm afraid, I can't let those things get me down. I can't whine and complain and argue. I just need to be obedient and trust God. So hopefully this is helping somebody out there. Hopefully you're encouraged or blessed, or you can go back and read Genesis 6 through 8 or 9 again, and be encouraged by somebody's faithfulness and someone's trust that God is sovereign, and somebody who didn't complain, and how all of mankind was saved because of that. So God bless. See you soon.